and this time, he wins.
So far, I've spent a great deal of time on this channel covering the legacy attractions that defined Universal, be it the original attractions when the parks first opened, such as Jaws, or those who followed shortly after, like Terminator. Looking back on Universal Studios Florida, at its opening, it would feature 4 full-sized e-ticket attractions such as Jaws, Earthquake, E.T., and the star of today's video, Kongfrontation. Before we get further into the video, I want to discuss how finding quality footage for this attraction has been quite difficult. So as I'm discussing Kongfrontation, I may not be able to show exactly what I'm discussing as footage for what I'm doing is limited. With that being said, if you enjoy the content you see here, leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already, and let's sink our teeth into Kongfrontation. Now, I know many of you still remember Kongfrontation, myself included, but when classic attractions are brought up, it seems to not be an attraction discussed nearly as much, trumped by other truly timeless experiences within the parks. This could be the case for several reasons, which we'll explore in this video. But I think when King Kong is brought up in terms of theme park attractions, most guests already have visions of the modern attractions available in the parks today. Yet, Kongfrontation was an entirely different animal, no pun intended, and the difference between then and now and how that IP has changed within the parks is quite drastic. So in order to understand how we got here, we have to first look at Kongfrontation's park debut. Kongfrontation opened to the public on June 7, 1990, at Universal Studios Florida, based on the classic 1976 King Kong film. It takes its elements from the King Kong encounter of Universal Studios Hollywood's Studio Tour, which began operation June 14, 1986. While the Hollywood version was simply a small section along the tour, the Florida version was developed as a freestanding attraction. Universal Florida did this with the majority of its e-ticket attractions that premiered at the park, based off sections of the tram tour at Hollywood Studios. This allowed Universal Creative a lot more artistic freedom as standalone attractions, allowing them to create much more immersive experiences. For this video, we're going to be focusing obviously on the Orlando version of the attraction, as it provides a full queue and a more elaborate, longer ride experience. That said, as usual, I'll discuss the queue, then do a walkthrough of the attraction. The queue begins as guests walk into Pennsylvania Station, located in the New York section of the park. As guests make their way into the queue, they'll hear a news broadcast detailing how King Kong has escaped from captivity and is loose in Manhattan, reporting the damages caused so far, such as downed power lines, fires, and broken water mains. Once guests make it past the initial entry, they'll find themselves located within a tram station, complete with maps, posters, and even graffiti. As guests continue through, they can see the station that is to be their destination, being Roosevelt Island Station. Moving further along, you'll see the queue is complete with TVs, giving continuous news reports on Kong and his whereabouts. Guests can also see closed storefronts and various building exteriors. The queue here really is something special, once again showing that Universal knows how to use environmental storytelling to get you invested in their attractions before boarding them. Again, with that notion of ride the movies. As for the storyline of this attraction though, it is pretty cut and dry. Guests find themselves in the middle of Kong's destruction and are being evacuated off Manhattan Island to Roosevelt Island. Much like Jaws, Kongfrontation relied entirely on practical effects and physical set pieces, with the tram operator serving a role similar to that of the skipper. The attraction begins as guests board an aerial tram to be evacuated from Manhattan Island. The tram operator then introduces himself, explaining that the tram is being escorted by a police helicopter. The operator turns the radio inside the tram to the police emergency frequency to monitor Kong's whereabouts in the city. Shortly after the tram departs, it enters Lower Manhattan, to which the operator describes looks like a war zone. Guests witness the aftermath of Kong's destruction with flipped cars, a derailed train, and ruined buildings. The police radio suddenly alerts all trams to stop as they are going directly into Kong's path. The operator quickly responds that they can't as the trams are automatic. Progressing further, guests see more chaos as they witness an exploding transformer erupt into flames, shattered steam pipes, and fire hydrants gushing water. Descriptions of the destruction can be heard from the police chopper above as the guests experience it. Guests then have their first confrontation with Kong, who is hanging from a bridge and roaring at the tram. They move directly in front of Kong, and as they do, the police helicopter opens fire on him. Kong swipes at the helicopter, hitting the tram instead, causing it to dip down. Thankfully, the guests make a narrow escape, but as the tram rounds the corner of a building, the police chopper's spotlight blinds the guest and the operator. The operator screams at them to shut the light off, and as they do, the guest and operator find themselves in front of Kong yet again. Surrounded by more destruction, Kong grabs the tram, lifts it up, and roars at the guest. Notably at this moment, guests will smell a banana scent that is emitted from Kong's mouth. The operator cries out for help, and the police chopper opens fire on Kong yet again, setting off an explosion behind him, causing him to drop the tram. The guests then make their full escape to Roosevelt Island, and after arriving at the station, TVs on board the tram play a news segment showing Kong grabbing them from the chopper's perspective, calling the guest and tram operator heroes. And with that, the attraction concludes. My time with Kongfrontation was short-lived, as I only got to ride it as a kid. So, a lot of what I'll be discussing will be based on my memory, research, and the footage you've been seeing throughout this video. Kongfrontation is definitely interesting to discuss, as it was, at the time, one of Universal's most impressive attractions regarding its use of large-scale sets that made guests really feel like they were in this vast open city, combined with the destruction elements such as the pyrotechnics, steam, and water that guests get to witness, and finally, its immersive queue. Combine all of these really did help sell this attraction well. However, I can't say this attraction has aged perfectly, as looking back it isn't the most thrilling by what would be today's standards. But I think even by today's standards, it's still impressive in its scale. It even had 2 fully animatronic Kongs, which for the time was extremely impressive. If we look back at Universal Studios Hollywood's King Kong Encounter, it offers some impressive set pieces as well. A great example being when Kong destroys a chopper that falls right next to the guest. It's very clear that the team behind the creation of both Kongfrontation and King Kong Encounter wanted guests to really witness what Kong was capable of. And I think the way the creative team used the physical sets and these Kong animatronics allowed guests to be immersed easily. Now, while Kong is impressive in its physical scale and its dedication to the theming, there unfortunately isn't much more to it. Well, that and Kong's famous banana breath. But that doesn't mean Kongfrontation was a bad attraction. It was simply limited by the technology of its time. And with what it had, it made something very impressive. With that being said though, it also doesn't seem to be the most remembered attraction when it comes up in the discussion of the Universal classics nearly as much, and I think I understand that when looking at attractions that debuted alongside it, like E.T., Jaws, and Earthquake. The IP of Kong was not nearly as relevant as others in the park at the time, like it would be today. And so with time, Kongfrontation would become more and more less relevant. Now, this isn't to say that the attraction didn't perform well or that it wasn't good overall, but being based on a movie from the 1970s in a park that began its opening in the 1990s could have played a factor in this closure, at least for a shorter lifespan compared to a lot of the other original attractions. However, I think Kongfrontation is a perfect example of how to create an attraction based strictly on practical effects and physical sets, and I think Universal is looking back on their older attractions like Kong to shape not only their new park, but future attractions as well. Because with the use of these physical sets, it allows for much more artistic freedom and detail that creates a stronger sense of immersion between the attractions and the land that they're harbored in. This is extremely evident when we look at Universal's success with Harry Potter. So with that, Universal has been able to find that creating a truly seamless experience allows for guest immersion to become that much better. Sadly, Kongfrontation is no longer present in the Hollywood Tram Tour or Universal Orlando. In Hollywood, the attraction was destroyed on June 1st, 2008 in a terrible fire that was ignited when a contractor took a blowtorch to asphalt shingles. The worker didn't confirm that the asphalt cooled down and left the site. Later, there was a large fire that destroyed not only the Kong section of the tour, but as well as 50,000 archived digital video and film copies and approximately 175,000 audio master tapes, making this an even bigger loss for Universal. In Orlando, however, the attraction didn't burn down, but closed on September 8th, 2002, as it was replaced by Revenge of the Mummy, an attraction I discussed on my channel not too long ago. In fact, the Mummy just celebrated its 20th anniversary, really proving to being a fitting replacement for Kongfrontation. Thankfully, it wasn't all bad news, as King Kong would go on to return to Universal Parks, first returning to Universal Studios Hollywood as King Kong 360 3D, this time based on the 2005 Peter Jackson film. It became part of the Tram Tour, much like the original, and debuted July 1st, 2010. But this time, the experience was entirely screen-based, leaving guests with mixed reactions. Now, what Universal would do is the same procedure they had done before with King Kong in Florida, making that part of the Tram Tour an entire attraction, this time in Islands of Adventure. Although with a few differences, of course, the attraction named Skull Island Reign of Kong opened on July 13th, 2016, has also received mixed responses from guests. Now, I have an entire video planned on a lot of attractions inside Universal and this screen-based phase that they went through, so that is something that we'll discuss a little bit more in the future. What's important right now, and what is the takeaway from this, is that King Kong did make his way back into the Universal Parks, and pretty quickly, only with about a 2-year gap between the fire and the debut of King Kong 360 3D. Although Kongfrontation was an interesting and unique attraction in its own right, it may not have the thrill factor most guests look for in an attraction today, but even all these years later, outperforms some of the modern attractions in terms of its scale and physical set pieces, from an era when Universal's tagline of Ride the Movies was tried and true. And even though many people watching this video may not have gotten to experience Kongfrontation, it is an attraction that will forever keep people in wonder, as well as be remembered as a Universal classic. Thank you all for watching the video. We're so close to reaching 1,000 subscribers, and I can't begin to express my gratitude for all the support. Thanks again, and let me know down in the comments your experience with Kongfrontation or the King Kong encounter. But until then, I'll see you guys in the next video.